Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of Monday Night Therapy. I'm your host, Minnie Hunt, and tonight we have just 73 days left until our first game in Kansas City against Cincinnati.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new Monday. What?
Hi, Greg.
Minnie, what are you doing?
Surprise.
You're not supposed to be here.
I know I'm not, but I just had to say hello to everyone.
Excellent. Well, you're legitimately not supposed to be here. Aren't you on vacation with your family?
I'm on vacation.
Okay.
Yes, but I'm still thinking of you guys and missing you. And I want to say have a happy show. Have a fun night.
And will you be here on Thursday for Five Heart Podcast?
Of course.
Okay.
And maybe even a Five Heart Theater.
Well, okay. You got time on the beach to devise one. So go be with your family, get those creative juices flowing, and we'll see you Thursday. And tell everybody goodbye.
All right. Go Big Red.
Yeah, so hi. Thank you all for your enduring patience. As you know, I'm Greg Mahachko, the host of the Five Heart Podcast and substitute host of Monday Night Therapy tonight. We promised you a special guest, and we're not going to waste any time. I hope, by the way, everybody saying later, Minnie, have fun with me. Like, we recorded that over the weekend. Like, she's legit not here. But Raji says, show said special surprise guest, not Greg. It is with great honor and privilege. I'm excited to welcome back. It's been a hot minute, and to his credit, he's had some things going on in his life, but please welcome to Monday Night Therapy, Mr. Hoss Reuter.
How's it going, Greg?
What's up, brother?
Oh, not too much. Just settling into dad life.
We're on the heels of your very first Father's Day.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
Good. It was different actually receiving gifts on Father's Day instead of just buying a gift for my dad, So it was interesting.
Just wait until Lil Lane is old enough to like hold a crayon or get into like daycare. So I got the twins in daycare now that it's summertime and Robert's out of pre-K and back hanging with Matthew. So I got 2 cards each from them from daycare. And one is it's a green like half sheet of construction paper. And on that is a green painted footprint. And it makes it supposed to look like a fairway or, something like that. And it says, "For the best dad, you are my," actually, hold on, I took a picture of it so I can tell you exactly what it says. Look at that. "For the best dad in the whole world."
Nice.
And then we got one that is supposed to look like a Weber grill with little construction paper cutouts of their hands. So, got that.
And also looks a little bit like a Thanksgiving turkey.
Well, then go potty. And they're supposed to be asleep.
Hey, mine is asleep right now.
Do you want to say hi real quick?
Hi.
Well, they can't see you. You want to sit in my lap real quick, say hi before you go potty again? I don't know what. All right. So this is Matthew.
Matthew, how's it going? I'm Hoss.
Say hi, Hoss. All right. Can you go to potty now and then go to bed? All right. Love you. You should be asleep by now. You should have been asleep an hour ago. Well, go potty. You don't need me to hold your hand. So, Father's Day is great. When they get to that age and they're doing little art projects like that, man, it's fantastic.
Lane did give me a Father's Day gift yesterday morning. As Katie and I were getting ourselves and him ready to go to my parents for brunch, he needed a diaper change, and so I took him into the nursery, and it was not quite a blowout, but it was damn close.
Those are the best gifts, yep. Really.
Getting better at diaper changes. I didn't change a diaper until I was almost 35 years old, and the first one was on my son, and First couple ones I thought, how hard it's going to be. It was the meconium after he was born.
Right.
And then he's a kicker. He really likes to fight me on it. And I kind of used a little bit of weaponized incompetence with Katie being like, Katie, you're so much better than me at this.
Oh,
Why
no.
don't you go ahead and do it? And then because I'm a self-reflective individual and not a total piece of crap, I was like, okay, I need to get it together. I need to get this diaper change thing figured out.
Well, let's I have so much that I want to get caught up on because it's been I can't remember.
I think my last appearance was either after the bowl game, after the Boston College win, or it was the greatest 5-heart theater of all time when I was the ghost of Husker football yet to come saying, "No, David."
Okay, well, he knows how to go potty. You all do. You're 4.
Best friend of the show, Josh, saying that my beard looks great. Thank you. Minnie saying just for men. I've been accused 3 times in like the past 3 months of coloring my beard. I do not color my beard.
I've been told that I should color my beard.
No, you just gotta let it go.
You do.
You should get the full beard going though.
So let's do this.
You got like this Carl Pelini goatee thing going on.
I've got 2 rambunctious rascals down here. Why are both of you downstairs? I'm gonna mute myself. I'm gonna go. Who in the heck would have thought at 9:00? This doesn't happen on a regular Monday night. I tell you. Take some comments. Entertain the folks while I get 2 4-year-olds back to bed because they're in trouble.
All right, I know I can't pull up the comments myself, so
That's all right. You can read them.
I'll just read them. And as Fred said, don't show us your crack, Greg, as you're getting up. Pull those britches up. All right, Josh, Greg's goatee does shockingly look like Carl Pelini's. I really hope that he doesn't have the extracurricular habits and activities of Carl Pelini, though. I hope that he could be as effective of a defensive line coach as Carl was. Man, a little quiet on the Western front with the comments today. The salt in Carl's salt and pepper goatee wasn't salt. Yeah. Fred, what is your all-time favorite episode of The Sopranos?
For crying out loud.
You've been watching old Nebraska games from the 80s and 90s. I really hope that you've discovered how great Doug Dubose was. Now, Bill Walsh said that Doug Dubose was the most naturally talented football player he had ever seen when he was with the Niners. He just couldn't keep his nose out of the cocaine. That's why the Niners called him Doug Do-Nose.
I didn't know any of that story. What year did the NFL decriminalize cocaine? Or I should say criminalize cocaine.
I think it's been criminalized ever since it was outlawed whenever in United States history.
Well,
I mean, we have to know that was after World War I because they used cocaine to treat PTSD patients after World War I.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
They didn't teach that in my state.
Well, I mean, down in the land of Lincoln, they probably just have you guys recite the old rail splitter's entire life story.
We did quite a bit of that. All right, so let's get back on track here. It was the bowl game was after Christmas, was it not?
Yeah, it was like right around New Year's,
Okay.
a couple days before New Year's. I can't even remember if we did a reaction show for that one.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't. My memory is so bad. So I mean, there is a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. Let's take this 6.5-ish month gap that, since the end of the 2024 season. Let's start there. because again, with your crazy family life and all the, everything that we didn't do the coordination over analysis or overreaction this time around like we did last year. So I just kind of want, let's take a quick look at, Hoss, your thoughts on with the opportunity to reflect on the 2024 season.
That is a great question to start off with, because I've been being at home now, both on paternity leave after Lane was born, and then with my job as a teacher, really only having meetings once a week and having a lot of downtime here at home over the summer. I started watching a lot of the 2024 season again. And I'll start off with kind of a macro level view and then kind of get more into the nuts and bolts of what I've noticed game by game.
I love it. We
were really close to having a dream season last year, if a few things could have gone differently. That Indiana loss, losing 56-7, was always going to be just absolute, you can't rationalize that one. Heading into that game, I thought at worst, maybe Indiana would beat us like 31-17. I didn't think it was going to be 56-7 bad. Right. We ran into a buzzsaw that day. And sometimes you see that happening more often in college football to really good teams. And I know as Husker fans, we have this tendency when a blowout loss happens to think that something is just endemic and systemically wrong within the program. But with everything that's going on in modern college football, sometimes it just does happen. It could be a game plan mismatch. It could be a personnel mismatch. Indiana was they had all those games leading up to it with a relatively weak schedule to build some confidence and some self-efficacy as a program. So that one, I'm not going to say, a few things go differently, we beat Indiana. But when you look at a loss to Illinois in overtime on that Friday night game, I mean, Dylan Raiola hits Luke Lindenmeyer in the end zone on that 3rd and 3, the play action pass. We're sitting at 4-0, and we're probably ranked anywhere from 13th to 15th after that game. Mm-hmm. That one was kind of where it showed that we had some issues. We sustained some injuries in that game on the offensive line with Turner Corcoran going out. And we had some communication problems on that last drive in overtime, giving up 2 sacks and a quarterback hit, within a 4-play sequence. From there, Ohio State, we took them to the limit. UCLA was kind of an aberration, much like Indiana. I mean, I think if you play that game 10 times, we probably win that game 8 or 9 times instead of that loss that we had to them. And then USC was still figuring out with Holgorsen. Iowa was a case of just Kirk Ferentz's black magic. Don't know what kind of deal he's made at a crossroads at his life, but had to have been something after Sean Eichhorst said at the end of the day, I had to reevaluate where Iowa was at. And so when you look at all those things, I always look back on Illinois beating South Carolina in the Citrus Bowl on New Year's Eve. That very easily could have been us. Mm-hmm. Now, on a more micro level, go ahead.
Before we micro, I want a couple things. Minnie says here that Indiana was the most heartbreaking game of the year last year. Are they in a position? I'll say, are they poised to have that type of season again this year, or was that just so many things had to fall in the right place for the Hoosiers? Like, is Curt Cignetti that good, or was it just a really good year for them?
Like him or hate him, I think Curt Cignetti's a damn good coach.
Okay.
I think that he has a really good system in place in terms of his offense. I think that he's a good motivator. I think he's rightfully or wrongfully, with the attention that he brings to Indiana with his brashness, I think that he's a great salesman for a program that kind of needs that edge. It's kind of, Indiana's historically been a basketball school, and football, it's been an afterthought. If I'm not mistaken, Indiana is the losingest program, Power 5 program of all time in college football. And so it's like the same thing why Danny Nee was successful with Nebraska basketball. He brought an edge to Nebraska basketball, which is something that, as much as I like Fred Hoiberg, I think is sorely missing in Lincoln on the hardwood. But with Curt Cignetti, I'll say a couple of things here. I think they'll still be really good this year. That transfer quarterback they got from Cal, his name escapes me off the top of my head right now, is a pretty good player. And I think he's really a fit for that RPO spread style offense that Cignetti likes to run. That being said, I think that until he can recruit at a really high level, I think that he's really going to struggle after all of his James Madison transfers age out of the program. I think that you're looking at it being pretty difficult to recruit and attract top talent to Bloomington, Indiana, barring, let's say they go back to the college football playoff this year, it maybe gets a little easier. But I think that as good as they were last year, they still ran into Ohio State. That absolutely, it was a belt to ass beatdown that they dished out. And then Notre Dame really, just stopped them cold in that playoff game in South Bend. So I think that Indiana, while their schedule was pretty soft, I think they built some confidence in themselves, but it'll be interesting to see if Cignetti can take them to consistent 10 or 11 wins. I think that Cignetti probably is more like a consistent 7-win to 9-win winner at Indiana, which would be great for them.
Right. Husker Chuck says, I Googled Cignetti. All he does is win.
I can't stand the guy, but
you can't.
I'm going to say this as somebody who really loves Matt Rhule. And not in the sense of, man, Matt Rhule can do no wrong. He's going to lead us back. So many political civil wars that have occurred within this program, depending on which coach you're in support of. But just I want Matt Rhule to be successful. The jury's still out, though. You still got to put the results on the field. But there are times where I really like Cignetti's brashness and don't give a crap attitude. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of wish Nebraska football had that sometimes.
Living in Omaha, David Matney. This isn't Thursday night, so I can't put the rest of the tag on there. But he says he's part of the Nick Saban coaching tree.
Coach receivers for him.
Another thing, that I've heard my Five Heart co-host Minnie say on that show, as well as on Monday nights, talking about Nebraska, Ohio State, is, she says we took the national champion down to, I think you used the phrase, down to the wire. That was a winnable game for Nebraska. How do we, and I know we'll go ahead.
I have some thoughts on that.
All right. Well, let's zoom in on the micro.
We took Ohio State to the limit, and we were a missed wheel route and a 4th and goal stop when Dowdell got stopped on 4th and goal from probably winning that game. But the Ohio State that we saw on October 26th was not the Ohio State that won the national championship on January 20th. Whatever happened after that Michigan game woke them up.
Yeah.
Because I think that if you would have had us play Ohio State when they played Tennessee in the 3rd Saturday of December, first round of the playoff game, I think that it probably would have been a call off the dogs kind of game.
Wow.
Maybe not, in terms of 56-7, but I think it would have been something on the order of 41-17, 41-24, something like that. So, but again, that goes back to what I was saying about Indiana. They used a weak schedule to build some confidence and momentum. And I think for us, that's what made that UCLA loss a week later to Ohio State so frustrating. Because I thought that taking Ohio State to the wire in the shoe was a great stepping stone for us as a program to have some confidence. And I was expecting us to come out firing on all cylinders against UCLA. Instead, Eric Bieniemy coaches the greatest game plan of his life. And I said this on the show back in November. He had a fantastic game plan for countering how we were trying to get pressure on Ethan Garbers. And then we make Ethan Garbers look like the white Mike Vick out there, just running down the field on a scramble. And so that, I think the UCLA loss, as much as I hate Iowa, was the most vexing loss last year. That's one game I will never rewatch. Because I was in the stadium for UCLA. That was one of the few times as a Husker fan that I've left either being at a game or watching a game going, why do I even bother anymore?
Even more than the Indiana game, which was the
Indiana game, at some point you just got to tip your hat and just be like, okay, they've got some dudes. Curtis Rourke was a really good quarterback. He's a system quarterback, but he was really efficient at what he did. It kind of reminded me of the old Texas Tech air raid quarterbacks that Leach and Holgorsen used to just pump out year after year. A lot of those guys look like they should have been tending a gas station out in rural middle of nowhere West Texas, and they'd go out there and they'd throw for 5,000 yards, like BJ Simmons or Cody Hodges.
So the UCLA game is the one you're never going to go back and revisit. Any other moments from last year that, and we could also, I know somebody in the comments a little bit ago said the CU game was great, and it was at least a really good first half,
Mm-hmm.
But we can always go back there and celebrate the victories. But, I've always said, and going back 20 plus years, I've heard coaches say, to the point that it's a cliche, well, you learn more from a loss than a win. So I think that's why we tend to focus on the L's more than the dubs. But we made, I'm going to borrow a phrase that you were using before it was cool, incremental improvement from 2023 to 2024. You have been lying in wait, so to speak, watching, reading, catching clips, reading, articles, things like that about this Husker football team for the last 6 or so months. Based on, and I know it's tough because we didn't get anything that resembled a spring game, but based on what you have seen, heard, and read, is this third season for Matt Rhule at Nebraska going to reflect the jumps that he had from second year 2 to year 3 at Temple and Baylor? Like, are we going to see less incremental improvement and more get out the gates and start running?
I think if you look at it from a purely numbers standpoint, from a record standpoint, one loss, it follows the same trajectory that he had at Baylor and Temple. Now, that being said, the Big Ten's a different animal than the Big 12.
Sure.
The Big Ten right now, it's the nation's best football conference. I don't even think that it's up for debate anymore. When you look at it top to bottom,
ESPN that.
When you look at it top to bottom, I think that and you put it right alongside the SEC's teams, and you just go line by line across, I think that the Big Ten is more of a quality, deeper league. I think it's got better teams in that 7-5 to 9-3 range than the SEC does. The SEC is top heavy in terms of their, heavyweights. Bama, LSU took a step back last year, but Bama, Georgia, Texas. Then Ole Miss. Ole Miss is kind of like a Penn State of the SEC.
I feel like they're always knocking on the door.
They're always knocking on the door, but they just don't really, in big games, they're kind of an enigma because, they take down Georgia last year. But what happened in that game? It was pouring rain and Carson Beck was injured.
Yeah.
So, great win by Lane Kiffin. I mean, I always joke around that I named my son after my favorite play caller in college football, Lane Kiffin. But that being said, Ole Miss is not consistent, being in that conversation to actually win it all. But to your point, that trajectory, that jump, that year 3 jump for Matt Rhule, it's all going to depend on one game, September 20th against Michigan. Now,
I want to say,
go ahead.
That's going to echo. Beetle B says, I think we go 3-0. Then we will see. He says our schedule looks hard after that. And I don't know about, whether or not it looks hard or difficult. But, yeah, September 28th against the Wolverines at home.
At home.
Mark your calendars because that needs to be everybody.
Coordination meetup Friday night before the game. And I know we had one for Colorado last year, so this is where I'm getting the inspiration from. Colorado was great last year. Beating Colorado, the buildup for that game was fantastic. It didn't mean a tinker's dam in the final analysis of things. It was a grudge match. It was a rivalry grudge match. All the hatred and disrespect from Deion Sanders the year before. Michigan means something. This is a team that, pardon the crass expression, the filthy animals. Wait, that's our show on Sundays. What are these the Chatterfields?
No. So I don't know what they are on Monday nights, but on Thursdays they're the Holger Maniacs. So you can call them whatever you want. It's like my mom always said, call them whatever you want as long as they call you for dinner. So
that being said, Michigan needs to have all the fervor leading up to it that Colorado had last year. And to my point, the whole situation comes down to one thing. Nebraska got bitch slapped by Michigan 2 years ago, worse than just about anyone's ever done it to Nebraska on Memorial Stadium's field. Sure, that was 45-7. We've lost by bigger margins, but just the complete and total domination that occurred in that game. I mean, we were hapless. We were absolutely hapless. And I remember Rhule after the game said, well, we knew Michigan was going to make a statement. We were the number 1 ranked rushing offense in the Big Ten and number 1 ranked rushing defense in the Big Ten. But here's the deal. Michigan wanted to show that they were the true bully in the conference. They wanted to assert their dominance. We were kind of, that number 1 ranked rushing offense was just out of necessity. And we kind of padded some stats a little bit against Louisiana Tech and Northern Illinois heading into that Michigan game. But that being said, that's another game, much like UCLA last year, that I remember watching that game. And by the end of it, I was like, why do I even care anymore? Like, this was just absolute embarrassment. So this is a great opportunity to plant the flag. If you're serious about the year 3 jump, show it in that game. Then you have a bye week and you have Michigan State after that. That's a Michigan State team that absolutely embarrassed us in East Lansing in 23. We're on the cusp of bowl eligibility, and we go up there and, kind of get pushed around a little bit by a 2-6 team. And on top of that, that was probably one of the worst game plans I've ever seen Nebraska have offensively. And we sleptwalked through the entire game.
Yep.
And so those 2 games are the pivot point of the season. You go be Michigan State champions for those, through that 3-week time frame, and you're sitting at 5-0 heading to go on the road to Maryland on October 11th.
I mean, I obviously haven't had an opportunity to talk with you about this, but of the 12 games on the regular season, there are only 4 true road games. Obviously, the first game, August 28th, is a neutral site, but it's in Kansas City. So I expect there to be a lot of red at that game. You and I will be at that game. So then you have Michigan State. You have Maryland. I'm sorry, Michigan State's at home. Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA, Penn State. A lot of those, I mean, you got to take care of the home field. You also got to go on the road and win some games in this conference, and it would be nice. I'm not certain. Look, I'm a fan. I'll be watching the game from my chair, but that Penn State game, I expect to be a primetime game.
Yeah, I bet it'll probably be a primetime night game, whiteout in Beaver Stadium. And I really don't think that we have a great shot in that game. I do think that, and it sounds funny to be forecasting this, it's the 11th game of the season, and we're still 2.5 months away from the start of the season. But I do anticipate that Rhule will have the team ready to play, especially since Penn State's his alma mater, going back home. I do agree that, we should be prepared for that game, but I kind of feel like Penn State is a momentum team, especially against teams that are a little bit lesser than them in terms of overall athleticism and talent. When they have that advantage on their side, they really feast on momentum. You saw what they did to SMU, a very good SMU team in the first round of the playoffs. And then what they did to Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. But once they ran into a team that played similar style of football to them, was probably just as talented, if not a little bit more talented than they were with Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, you saw that they just kind of folded. I mean, like, they battled late in the game, but they had the typical almost kind of Washington Generals against the Harlem Globetrotters. The rug gets pulled out from underneath of them. It's kind of reminiscent. I would be thrilled with going into that game. Let's see, that's the 11th game of the season. I'd be thrilled going into that game 8-2, 9-1, and playing them within 3 to 10 points in that environment.
The way you describe Penn State and how, for lack of a better term, they bully around, like less talented, less athletic programs. I think of Rocky, and I guess it's Rocky Balboa It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Like, it's easy. It's easy to punch down. But when another team's, lining up across from you and they're punching you in the mouth, you got to be able to stand toe to toe and keep battling. And Penn State couldn't do that against Notre Dame, so.
No, they threw a late interception and they just kind of folded from there. I think they had some missed opportunities in the red zone as well. In terms of Nebraska at Penn State, what that game, if we're going to have a shot in that game, what it means, you got to have the three things that travel well: run game, your defense, and a kicking game, your special teams. And so I know there was a Mike Eckler comment earlier in the chat where somebody said, did Mike Eckler run by my house yet? No, he has not ran by, my house here in dear old Gretna. But that's a game where you got to control field position. There's probably going to be some moments where you should score a touchdown in the red zone, but the crowd, the hostile environment maybe causes some communication issues and you're going to be settling for field goals. It'd be really nice not to have, every field goal feel like it's a coin flip at best. It'd be nice to have some confidence in our kickers this year from the get-go. And then you want to be able to start with good field position. You don't want to have to string together, a 12-play, 90-yard drive to score on Penn State. One, because of their defense. Two, the longer you're on the field in a hostile environment, the greater the chance of a mistake being made is. A miscommunication, the call not getting in correctly, receiver not hearing the quarterback, audibling at the line of scrimmage or changing their route pre-snap. So you want to be able to make that game as efficient as possible, run the ball, take the crowd out of it, convert third downs, fourth down and short yard situations in the red zone. I think you need to, Greg, I think you need to put that shirt in a frame if we rush for like 225 against Penn State.
I will do that. I'll put it in a shadow box. We'll put it behind me here. We'll hang it on the wall. If we do 225 against Penn State, 225 or more. I don't know what it is. 225.
That really annoying little gnome of a former head coach at Indiana, Tom Allen. Wait, no, Tom Allen is not their defensive coordinator anymore. That's my bad. He's at Clemson now. Jim Knowles from Ohio State is now their defensive coordinator.
Some people just continue to fail upwards, right?
Jim Knowles is a pretty dang good offense.
I was talking about Tom Allen.
Yeah, Tom Allen. That's a guy like trying to think of a good analogy. I remember a couple of years ago when we were looking to hire somebody after we fired Frost, I called Bill O'Brien the ham sandwich of football coaches. Tom Allen is like the Kraft Singles of football coaches. I don't know. I need to come up with a good like fast food analogy for him, I'm not going to call him the Casey's Pizza of football.
No.
Because Casey's Pizza, that's to paraphrase Pulp Fiction, Casey's Pizza is some serious gourmet stuff.
This is probably going to piss some people off, what I'm about to say. Tom Allen may be the In-N-Out burger. Just kind of there.
Yeah.
Nothing spectacular.
I had it when I was in California last, and I was like, it's okay burger. Their fries suck.
Right. Okay. No,
I'm not. Tom Allen is the Quiznos of football coaches.
Tom Allen is the beef and cheddar of Arby's.
Don't tell that to my girlfriend. One of the funniest pregnancy cravings she had through the entire course of her pregnancy. She woke me up at 3:30 in the morning, and I was like, "Is everything okay? What's going on?" And she goes, "What time do you think Arby's opens?" And I was like, 10:30. And she's like, "How do you know that?" And I was like,
"Trust me.
Fast food restaurants open at 10:30." And she goes, "Do you think they serve breakfast?" And I was like, "No, Arby's does not serve breakfast."
Oh man. So we've kind of taken a quick look at the 2025 season, and we're not getting into predictions. You're more than welcome to join us in August for our prediction show, Hoss, on the 5 Heart Theater. But you were in the Holger Maniacs last Thursday on the 5 Heart, and you said that the 2025 offensive line may be the best since 2006.
I did say that.
I didn't hate on your RBs. Why am I getting yelled at here?
You did.
First of all, remind the folks what stood out about that 06 offensive line, and if the 2025 version of the offensive line is an addition by subtraction. By that I mean we don't have Bryce Benhart anymore.
Well, the 06 offensive line, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember if Carl Nix was on that team yet in 06 or if he was just a one-year rental in 07. Let me check real quick because that's my whole basis.
I'm looking at it. Are you looking too?
Yeah, Carl Nix was on the team. He wasn't quite a full-time starter until the end of the year against Colorado and against Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. But on that team, you had Carl Nix, who for a time there was the highest paid left tackle in the NFL. And then he signed with the Buccaneers and came down with MRSA, staph infection from the Bucs locker room, and he basically ended his career. You had Leiden Murtha, who was a really solid player, probably never lived up to the billing that we expected as a borderline 5-star, but he was very, very physically talented, athletic, strong. I think he had a pretty good stint with the Dolphins. You had Matt Slauson on that offensive line. You had a senior Greg Austin, Frost's former offensive line coach here, he was a really solid player.
Wasn't he a center?
No, he played offensive guard.
Okay.
And then you also on that team, did I mention Matt Slauson?
You did.
Yep. And then also on that offensive line, you had Brett Byford, who took over for Kurt Mann after he had some injury or illness issues. And then you had Brendan Coe, who was a solid player, not spectacular, but those guys were really fundamentally sound. It kind of was at that point in year 3 of Bill Callahan that offensive line could run block. They weren't just pass blocking like in 05. And the big thing was the jump they made from 05 to 06. So in 2005, I think we were almost 100th nationally in the country in rushing yards per game. We gave up almost 40 sacks that year. Zach Taylor took a beating in pretty much every game. Then 2006, we turned around. Bill Callahan had the pound the rock mantra.
Right.
And then we focused on run the ball with Brandon Jackson, Kenny Wilson, Cody Glenn, and Marlon Lucky. And so that offensive line, I think, probably would have been even better if we would have committed a little bit more to a solid running game that year instead of still trying to really blend that pro-style West Coast approach. And so I think that what made them good is familiarity in the system. It's like one of the few smart things that Scott Frost said was, in order to win in the Big Ten Conference, you got to get old and stay old up front on both sides of the ball, offensive line, defensive line. And we're finally at a point where we're old up front. I mean, you still have Turner Corcoran, you have Teddy Prohaska,
who are both combined 43 years of college football time at this point.
Yeah, right.
Injuries.
Justin Evans Jenkins, or I think he just goes by Justin Evans now, is a very solid player. He's been very solid since his start at Nebraska in 23 when he got into the lineup. And then you got Rocco Spindler, who was at Notre Dame, played at a really high level. So you got guys who look the part physically of a good offensive line. And now, and the addition of Elijah Pritchett from Alabama at left tackle as well. Totally forgot about him. So now when you have those guys up front, guys that understand the base scheme, understand the adjustments that you're making at the line of scrimmage, and have the grown man strength of being, 22, 23 years old, or in some cases, probably like 29 years old, it's a recipe for being really good on the offensive line. I think that is as critical as I was about Donovan Raiola as offensive line coach in 22. And then kind of the WTF moment when Rhule retained him to start the 23 season.
Right.
He has gotten consistently better each year. And I think that when I was at the coaches clinic back in April, he had just kind of the bearing as he was presenting over the different run schemes and the different techniques that the offensive line is utilizing, that I think he's developing into a really effective offensive line coach. I think that it's the long game of development that we've had to play, especially because in the portal, you're not going to be able just to go and get an absolute stud left tackle as easily as you can get a stud at other positions.
Because
And I
they're
think
going
that
to the
there's going to
NFL.
be more of a commitment than people think to running the football in Holgorsen's offense. I think that while so many people think Dana Holgorsen, Texas Tech, putting up 70 on Clemson in the Orange Bowl when he's at West Virginia, I think that his offense probably is going to resemble more of what he did at West Virginia from 2015 to 2018 with Wendell Smallwood and Russell Shell at running back, and Will Grier at quarterback, and David Sills kind of playing that big F slot receiver role that Heinrich Haarburg will probably fill. So I think that you're going to see that commitment to running the football, yet paired with a pretty explosive vertical passing game. I'm not going to get too much into scheme stuff, tonight, but you're going to see a vertical passing game, especially with a lot of deep crossing routes probably out of this team, built off of play action, also being able to drop back and throw it just out of the gun, without a play fake. And pairing those two things together, because you have to be able to throw the football effectively to win. Somebody earlier in the comments said, do run-based offenses still work? You're starting to see this migration back to really heavy run-based offenses because defenses got so light to defend against the spread that now offenses are countering that with getting heavier in their personnel, tight ends, fullbacks, more workhorse running backs, or workhorse by committee running back approach, that you're really going to see more of an emphasis probably on football that almost looks more like it's the late 90s, early 2000s with a lot of the top flight teams that are able to get that kind of talent to just have the size and strength advantage up front. And I think that Nebraska is always going to want to control the football game. Matt Rhule is definitely a line of scrimmage fundamental type football coach. And I think that we've learned over the past however many years of our ineptitude that
which there have been many,
you're going to run into weather days in this conference, in this area of the country, that as much as you can still throw the football when it's cold, and you can even throw the football when it's snowy, the big thing is the wind in this conference. And so you have to be able to rely on a running game. It's just like against Iowa. Emmett Johnson had that great game the week before against Wisconsin to get bowl eligibility, 113 yards rushing, 85 yards receiving. He got yanked out of the Iowa game. He got yanked out of the Iowa game because he danced around too much. He, was leaving yards on the field because he was trying to break the big play. And instead of just going north-south and picking up 5 or 6 or 7 yards and getting you into 2nd and 3, he danced for a 2-yard gain. We'd be sitting at 2nd and 8. Well, you pair, those runs right up the middle or just getting vertical when you see a hole and not dancing around, you're in a much more manageable situation. You're in 2nd and 2. You're in 3rd and 3. And so that's why we put in Dowdell later in the game, because he ran more north-south, didn't dance around. You have to have that ability in this conference. I don't think that's something that Nebraska is ever going to really go away from. I think it's always going to be a core part of the identity.
I want to do a little comparison again between the 06 squad and 2025, because, you mentioned a lot of those Huskers from, hard to believe, almost 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Jackson, Cody Glenn, Kenny Wilson, Marlon Lucky. And then you mentioned, that running back by committee. Are we going to see where there's just kind of one guy that is, going to be utilized 80% of the time? Or is it going to be situational? Is it going to be, I feel like the prevailing thought is Emmett Johnson's the guy, but he's not the only guy. I mean, he's not the only running back. He's just the most experienced one. So I think that gives him a leg up. But what's your thought on the running back room?
We really needed to get Marty Brown from North Dakota State. And I think not getting Marty Brown probably had a direct correlation to Vince Genatone getting switched to running back. And I have a thought on what Genatone at running back could potentially mean, but right now I'll focus on Emmett Johnson. Emmett Johnson is a really good football player.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good offensive weapon. He's a great outside perimeter runner. He's great out of the backfield, but I don't know if he's quite to that level of being the guy yet. I know Husker fans, we have a tendency to want to anoint players as the second coming, after a couple of good performances. But one of the things with Emmett Johnson is the dancing. You just need to get north-south. He did a better job in the bowl game against Boston College.
I feel like that's something that can be
taught,
remedied,
Yeah. It can be taught, it can be coached. I know EJ Barthel talked about it in an interview over the offseason that, vision for running backs is really important. That's why Quentin Ives hasn't seen the field all that much to start, because his vision need to get better. You need to get stronger in the weight room. And then you've got Quentin Ives, which I liked some of the stuff that we saw from him in the bowl game, but he's still largely an unknown. It looks like he's put on some really good weight, some really good size, but until you do it in a major college football game, it's just potential at that point. So I think switching Genatone to running back after not getting Marty Brown from North Dakota State, I like what Genatone could bring to that position. He's 230 pounds with track speed. He's a 10.5, 10.6 guy. Anyone who's that big and that fast, you're basically like John Riggins at that point. Which I'm not calling him John Riggins yet, but I'm just using it to illustrate the point of why that size and speed pairs well.
Sure, right. That kind of size reminds me of like Amani Cross going back a dozen or so years.
Amani Cross, the size, yes, the speed. He really didn't have great. He had good straight line speed. He didn't have the lateral quickness to really be the guy. He was a great guy that great running back that filled in spots. When we were short yardage, he was the touchdown vulture one year. And then along with that, when there were injuries in 2015 to the running back position, he chipped in, I want to say right at about 100 yards in that upset win over Michigan State in Riley's first year. But Genatone, with that size and speed, you really think, could this guy be that kind of big hammer back out of the spread that when you're lining up in 10 or 11 personnel, that you're able just to get mismatches because defenses are growing lighter to defend the speed that you have on the perimeter. And then you got a 230, 235-pound tailback coming through and, just being a wrecking ball against, smaller defenders. So I think you will see him factor in at some point this season. I also think that Mekhi Nelson, he redshirted, he's from Connecticut last year. He's a late addition to the 24 class. I think that he could potentially be a player that's really solid as well. Again, it's all just potential. We have to put it on the field. I think that's the biggest thing, not to go off on a tangent, but just having this, we have potential. It's kind of like shit or get off the pot with Husker football after a while. It's like, great potential. Go win 8 to 10 games, okay?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, I guess I've never thought of it. We talk about commits, and I think actually Nebraska just got another lineman commit today.
Hayden Ainsworth.
Yes. Which is a Nebraska name if I've ever heard of it. I don't think he's from Nebraska. I think he's from Biloxi, Mississippi. Well, however, if you read that on coordination.com, it's going to say Biloxi, Missouri. It's not. It's Mississippi. I mean, it's good. He chose Nebraska over Alabama and, some other programs that are probably, at least in the current culture of college football, perceived a little higher than Nebraska. But you're right. I always go back to until they put on pads and start hitting other guys in practice, I'm okay. I kind of wait with a very measured amount of excitement. It's like until they sign their national letter of intent, they can change. And then, like we saw years back, here's another name from the past, Bubba Starling. Like that don't mean diddly. Just because they sign doesn't mean they're walking on campus. So, it's just a whole lot of talk. It's a whole lot of potential energy, not kinetic energy. Bring it back to science.
Speaking of that potential, I'm probably going to piss off somebody in the chat, i.e. Minnie, when I say this, but I think that some of the conversation surrounding Dylan Raiola has been the hype trains leaving the station. I think I'll finally get excited when he's consistently making throws that he should. And then along with that, He needs to up the touchdown to interception ratio, increase the touchdowns, lower the interceptions. And I think that overall just needs to have better command of the game and not slide 2 yards shy of the first down constantly.
I was going to say it.
Yeah.
You made a lot of
it's a throwback to the COVID era, but Joe Exotic, I will never financially recover from this. It's kind of like when he slid shy of the first down last year, it was like, especially against USC in kind of a tight moment, it was I will never emotionally recover from this. You got to have situational awareness at all time. You're the colonel out there on the football field. You are the field general. Go out there and command your troops. You have to know where everything is at on the field at all times.
Minnie's watching. You got a lot of friends in the comments, and one detractor will say.
And I'm going to say this too. About Dylan Raiola. He has the potential to be the first Nebraska quarterback that goes and really does something in the NFL at the quarterback position.
True.
But based on what he showed last year, and I'm doubling down on this, I know I said it to you last fall on the overreaction show as well. When you talk about generational talents at the quarterback position, Trevor Lawrence is a freshman at Clemson. You knew that he was him. He was that guy. He was going first overall in the draft when his time came. Dylan Raiola has not shown that quite yet. He has the potential to be very good, Minnie. I know you're saying he was a freshman at 9:52 p.m., but let's not, to quote the late Denny Green, to paraphrase the late Denny Green, let's not go ahead and crown him quite yet. Nebraska fans as a whole, myself included, we have this tendency to make everybody into the next Tommy Frazier. Let him play football. Let him develop. And I'm not singling you out, Minnie. I love the energy that you've got for Dylan Raiola. But he needs to lead us on, some drives in tight moments, win some big games, show that he's developing year over year. His arm strength and accuracy decreased as the year went on. I think that's probably a function. I'm pretty sure that when Rutgers hit him quite a few times, I think he did sustain some form of a shoulder injury because he was never the same after that. But you've got plays against the touchdown pass to Banks right before halftime against UTEP might have been the best throw that he'll make ever in his career at Nebraska. I mean, it was a high-level NFL throw. The drop that Isaiah Nayor had on our first drive against UTEP that was in the end zone went through Nayor's hands, a little harbinger of doom for what was to come against Iowa 11 games later. That was a very impressive throw. He had a throw to Jalen Lloyd against Colorado where he rolled out right on a dead run, threw back late across the middle, across his body, and hit Lloyd. It was a beautiful throw. It was also kind of a poorly thrown ball, all things considered, because Lloyd had to come back for it. But it's the consistency that he needs to put together. It's continuing to grow, continuing to develop as a player. And I do think that he could be a first-round draft pick in 3 years' time. That being said, he's not there yet. That's all my point is.
What's your take on the other Dave who says his supporting cast sucked last year? Receivers couldn't block or get separation on routes. He would have shined at a top 15 school.
I think that receiving wise, I think that he had a pretty good supporting cast. I agree that he would have shined at a top 15 school. I think the big thing that held him back early on, and it took wasn't enough time after Holgorsen took over to break some bad habits overall, was having Marcus Satterfield as the play caller. It was those games before Holgorsen took over were downright painful to watch offensively. Just even in games that we were winning, UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Purdue, Rutgers. It was the same collection of 5 to 10 plays, packaged a little bit differently. We didn't have a good concept of spacing. We didn't have a good concept of play calling timing, knowing when to call certain plays, the feel for the game that every good offensive coordinator has. So while my critique might have been a little harsh on Dylan, and I'll own it because I still believe that he has a long ways to go to be what I think everyone thinks he's capable of being. he was done no favors with Satterfield. I mean, imagine if Holgorsen would have taken the job at Nebraska in January of 24 and had a full off season to install what he wanted to install, have everybody, on the same page, have all the assistant coaches on the same page with game planning. It could have been much different, but instead, we learned late, we made the change. I got to tip the hat to Rhule there because football coaches are pretty risk averse people by nature. And a lot of people wouldn't make that move. But Dylan, just play your game, develop your own identity. Don't copy Patrick Mahomes anymore. Just be yourself and learn not to slide shy of the first down. Do a Pete Rose head first dive if you have to.
I got a few comments here that are tickling me to no end. Fred says, if the Dylan Raiola experiment ends, we can always go with the better option, Haarburg. Now, before you react to that one, Beetle B says, I'm down with Haarburg. And Roger Moore says, HH starting the first game would be great motivator for Dylan.
Heinrich Haarburg won 5 games in 2023 off nothing but sheer will and determination.
Amen. Living in Omaha, David Matney does want to know, why does Rhule escape any criticism for hiring Marcus Satterfield in the first place?
I've always figured it probably wasn't his first choice as offensive coordinator. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of reports that we were going to hire Jake Peets from the LA Rams to be the offensive coordinator. He was Rhule's quarterbacks coach in Carolina. I think he also had a stint as the OC at LSU, and then he played for Callahan here as a long snapper. But yeah, Sat, I don't think he was ever the guy. And I think Rhule erred on the side of caution of, hey, I'm just going to hire a guy I know. Someone I'm comfortable with, someone I know how they work.
I mean, sometimes it's, hate to say it like this, but it's the devil you know.
Yeah.
And we've seen now, by the time we get to August, that'll be close to 9 months of Dana Holgorsen, in the program and, working with Dylan. I'm sure we talked about it last season. I'm going to blame it on my bad memory. You have the eidetic memory. So just what's the Dana Holgorsen difference?
I think someone who's done it at a high level for a long time. There's a great game. Dana Holgorsen, when he's at West Virginia, they played Texas in 2018 down in Austin. And Texas, that was the year that they went and beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl after they lost to Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. Texas was loaded with NFL dudes all up and down the roster. They went into Austin. I think they won like 41-40. And Holgorsen kept calling the same few plays all game long, the deep Y cross, weak side flood concept. And I think they scored late with just a few seconds left, and it's 40-39. And he went for 2. Quarterback draw with Will Greer for the 2-point conversion. That takes some balls to call that in that situation. To have such a mastery of an offense that's pretty lean to begin with in terms of overall play selection, but it's all about repetition, I think is something that comes only with experience, because Satterfield really became too predictable by trying to do too much. In 2023, you almost saw a different offense kind of week to week that we were trying to do. Early on, it was this weird, against Minnesota and Colorado, it was this weird pro-style run game supplemented with some quarterback run game because of Jeff Sims. Against Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech, we were almost like just in the gun and in the eye the entire time, running a lot of old Nebraska option concepts. And then from there, we kind of rode that out, and then we were changing stuff week to week where it really wasn't repetition and developing identity. I know identity is such a buzzword that's thrown around here. It's kind of red meat for the masses, but as an offense, you have to have an identity by having a system. We didn't have a system under Satterfield. He was just running a collection of plays. He was just
I remember that was
as a play caller.
That was something, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I remember that being not the mantra, but the theme of a lot of our coordination overreaction Sunday night shows when you're like, we don't have an offense, we have a playbook, and it's just like, which one do we pick today? There was nothing. There was no. I don't want to say consistency or theme. There was just no rhyme or reason to a lot of it.
No, there wasn't. And sometimes a good play caller, if it's 3rd and 9, this sounds antithetical to converting a 3rd down to a 1st down, but sometimes they'll know to call a play where they'll know a certain read will be open on a pass. And when you pick up 7 or 8 yards and you get to 4th and 1, you already have your play call ready to go for that 4th and 1, something that you can run. It's going to give you a good chance to convert that into a 1st down.
Mm-hmm.
Satterfield, it kind of seemed like he was just out there calling plays like some people have mentioned on here, like you do on NCAA football. Hey, I'm over on this hash. I'm going to run it back wide this side, So I think when you have a system and it's built off of so many different plays that are all the same base concept. So if you're going to run a weak side flood concept with a deep crossing route that's going to force coverage might be rotating to the field, and you're getting that crossing route going against the grain of the coverage rotation, you might have that as a drop back pass. You might have that attached on a screen. You might have a screen fake attached to it, and then you look downfield after faking to the, a swing screen or a flare screen. And then along with that, you might have that built off your play action running game. If you've really got the running attack going, you're running, let's say you're running counter really effectively. And then you're like, okay, well, we're going to run Y cross built off of counter, and we're going to get the defense to come up thinking it's run. We're going to force those safeties to trigger down on the run. You're going to break apart coverage and get somebody open deep. All it is just having a system, trusting in that system. And I think that when it's just like anything else in life, you have people who are results oriented and you have people who are process oriented.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that process oriented thinking is better for success every time. You trust the process. Bo Pelini said, trust the process. Get better every day. I think that people fall into a trap of results oriented thinking. It doesn't matter what it's in: business, education, coaching, whatever endeavor you're in. People get so focused on the results of it that they become impulsive in their decision making.
Right.
Instead of just trusting that you have a system that works, knowing how to troubleshoot it. So if you're playing Iowa, and Iowa this is the way they teach their run defense, and it directly correlates to our game against them last year. They look at when we ran split zone out of the shotgun. So Dylan is in the shotgun. He's got a running back on each side of him. We have a back faking one way to cut off the pursuit from the backside defensive end. We're zone blocking the other way. Quick little fake to the back going to block the DN. Then you turn, you give the ball to Emmett Johnson, running the zone dive on the other side. So Iowa teaches how to defend against that you look at eyes and the helmet stripe on a helmet and to see which direction players are looking. We gashed Wisconsin repeatedly with split zone out of the shotgun. Little cross buck play is what they call it. Against Iowa, we couldn't get that play going at all. It was like they knew exactly where we were going. They had us figured out based on our tendencies, formationally, personnel-wise, and pre-snap triggers of where our guys are looking, where their heads are pointing, and just the same thing as a good linebacker will know when somebody's going to pull, because an offensive lineman might sit a little higher in their stance, so they're ready to pull out and, go around the corner. There's a joke for you, Fred. So when you have an offensive coordinator like a Dana Holgorsen, what that really comes down to is, okay, Iowa's taking away our split zone concept. Like we're in a little bit of trouble here. This is what we were thinking was going to be the bread and butter of our game plan. Ways to go away from it, to maybe still show that tendency and then hit them with a tendency breaker. I think there was a play against Iowa that we faked the split zone concept. Dylan kept it, rolled out, and flipped it to Dowdell in the flat on kind of a little bootleg RPO action. And so That's what a good offensive coordinator does. They build in answers into their system to have available in the moment instead of going, well, we're going to have to get in the film room and see what they were doing. Like, good offensive coordinators are always adjusting on the fly in game.
Is that the boss saying, wrap it up?
No. Well, yeah, it is the boss, but, just asking if she can come in to grab something out of the nursery real quick.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's her house, too. I mean, god dang.
It's Lane's house. I call him the Lane Lord.
He runs the show.
Yeah, he's like Pol Pot, man. He's a brutal dictator. No, I'm just kidding.
Mr. Matney wants to know, based on past performance, why do we think Satterfield will be a competent tight end coach?
That's a great question. That is a phenomenal question because there's nothing that suggests that he'll be successful except for the fact that he has been a tight ends coach in the past. He doesn't have play calling responsibilities. He has a small, meeting room of players. It's not, overseeing 25, 30 guys like if you're an offensive line coach. You're not in charge of the big picture stuff. You're teaching blocks, you're teaching releases, and you're teaching run schemes, along with the passing game, which when it comes down to tight ends learning the passing game, they usually go with the receivers coach on a lot of things to learn. They kind of split up tight ends a little bit more. I do think that based on what I saw at the coaches clinic, he's got a great passion for coaching tight ends. I think that based on a lot of the drill work, that these are tight ends that could be really good this year for us. I think we have a lot of athletic tight ends in the meeting room. I had a bold prediction last week on was that the 5 Heart podcast, where I think Heinrich Haarburg could potentially be an all Big Ten type of performer as that tight end, big slot receiver position that Holgorsen loves to have in his offense. So
I do like.
Who knows? I think that this might be the break that this guy needs, to kind of lick his wounds, so to speak, as a coach. After I don't care if he's making $1 million or $1.2 million a year. Like, this is a guy that's still a football coach. He's still been to the pinnacle of his profession in terms of being a play caller. There's got to be some bruised egos there. And maybe he stuck around Lincoln because he had no other options to go on where to go. Maybe it was a case of, hey, I'm making $1 million a year to coach tight ends. Why would I want to leave? Why would I want to leave this position? Money talks and BS walks. So if we get into the season and we see a lot of mistakes from our tight ends, missed assignments, poor route running, bad blocking, yeah, he's not the guy for the job. But I think it should be at least something where let's see how he does. I'm willing to give it a shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
You mentioned the coaches clinic. That was back in April, which really threw off my time frame because I thought it was in May, and we were going to kickstart something up after that, or at least have you on the 5 Heart to talk about it. But again, you're blessed with a type of memory that I can only dream of. So what type of wisdom was dispensed there at the coaches clinic? Like, what were some of your big takeaway points?
The team looks very athletic. That's the big thing. Elijah Pritchett looks like he's an NBA power forward at 330 pounds. Heinrich Haarburg, saw him walking by at one point, and honest to God, he almost looks like a bodybuilder, like getting ready to compete. Like, the guy really reshaped his body, put on some weight, moves exceptionally well. I hate to sound like Frank Solish saying, "Oh, they're moving around real well out there," but I think he could be a dude at that position. I think we saw a glimpse of that in the bowl game where, he caught a few passes. He threw some really good blocks as well. But one of the things that stood out to me the most was just the common identity that this program has under Rhule. I think that it's something where everybody's pulling in the right direction. They're all rowing the boat together, to invoke the name of somebody who's the public enemy in this state. Somebody we haven't beaten since 2018. And so I think that there's just a really good vibe around the program. There was nothing really earth-shattering, with maybe the exception of telling Minnie that Dylan did look pretty slim down. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of cruel that the coaches clinic is all the way in April, and you're like, oh yeah, that was sweet to go to, little taste of football in April, and then you realize you're still so far from the season starting.
Real quick here, I think it was Roger asked earlier what I was drinking tonight, and I actually have from Wales some Wrexham Lager, and I've just dripped a little bit out on my keyboard. That's cool.
Wrexham damn near killed them.
Well, if you're familiar with Welcome to Wrexham, it's on FX. It's a docu series based on the Welsh football club that's owned by Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. This Wrexham Lager has been brewed since 1882. The 4% alcohol by volume. This is a pint. It's a nice, smooth drinking beer. It's a little 4-pack from Total Wine, so I'm enjoying it. I wanted to pass that along.
How effed up did you get off that beer last week? That was 9.5%.
I was fine. I mean, I would say I don't want to say that I got criticism, but I got told after the fact, like, maybe the 9.5% is probably too much for the show.
Felt like, spirit of full disclosure, friend to friend here, felt like you were a little tipsy by the end of it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'll stick to the maxing out at 7.5.
Yeah, I'll stick to the Coors Banquet.
I know you will. Hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah, I mean, those Yingling lights, though.
I was gifted a 12-pack of that. It was on my front stoop from a neighbor. Welcome to the neighborhood type of thing a couple weeks ago. So,
did you like time travel to 1950s America? Is that
on my front stoop?
Yeah. down there in southwestern Illinois.
I did not. No, but apparently, like close friends of my parents live like one block over, and so they just dropped it. I didn't know it. I think I was doing bath time with the kids or something like that. I was giving them baths. I wasn't myself anyway. So they just put it on the.
People have been driving by saying, "That's right. Go back to Belleville."
No. So we talked about offense. What is your biggest hope or biggest concern on the defensive side of the ball?
Run defense and getting good pressure.
Okay. So a lot of these things can be up front?
Yeah, I think we lose a lot of really good players from last year. And people can always, get mad about James Williams going to Florida State and then talking trash, which I'm right there with everyone on. But James Williams wasn't a nobody. He was a really effective speed rusher on third down. But losing Ty and Nash and Jamari Butler is huge. You really hope that Van Poppel, Elijah Judy, Cameron Lenhart, Williams Nunweary, probably butchered his name, the transfer from Mizzou. You got to hope that those guys can step up. I think that defensively we might be a little bit weaker against the run than we've been for the past couple of years, but I think that we'll be better in the back end in terms of coverage and a little bit better linebacker play than the past 2 years.
Well, I'll say this. I don't know when the last time was that you ventured over to Huskers.com and looked at the roster, but I feel like a solid third of the roster is defensive back.
Yeah, and I mean, we always talked about third and Chinander under Eric Chinander.
Right.
We were great at getting teams to third down.
Yeah.
I mean, our first and second down defense was great. It was third down that would give up a big play or
leaky valve.
Third and Tony White was a thing too. I mean, I really like Tony White and what he did to turn a defense around so quickly from 2022 to 2023. But we had a tendency, especially in big games, to really kind of freeze up on third down. And I think that might have been some of the disconnect between Rhule and Tony White last year, where I think Rhule did want to get more aggressive on third down, and White wanted to play it more conservative and just try to get pressure with our front, which can't blame him for that. You got a front like that, you're going to get pressure more often than not. You want to make sure you're all covered in the back end. But at the end of the day, you need to get a little bit more exotic with your coverage. Some of the 3 high safety stuff was nice that we would utilize, but we didn't really utilize that on third down. We would utilize that in the red zone to hold teams to field goals, blanket the coverage deep. But, if it's 3rd and 8 and the opponent has the ball on their own 42-yard line and everything's kind of wide open, we had a really bad tendency to stay in really static coverages, whether we'd be just doing like 2 high safeties, or we'd be in a cover 3. We'd roll into a cover 3 with 1 high and try to condense everything to the point where the only openings are up the seam and have that 1 high safety kind of playing center field. But a lot of times we got killed with option routes from slot receivers. That first year under Rhule, we lost to Wisconsin in overtime. Their slot receiver, Will Pauling, he torched us on 3rd down. I think he probably had about 65 or 70 yards on 3rd down alone in that game.
Wow.
And that's a situation where you got to get off the field. 3rd down's the money down. I mean, it doesn't matter what you did on 1st and 2nd down at that point. You have to get off the field on 3rd down. I'd like to see us get a little bit more aggressive with jumping routes too.
That'd be fun. I mean, kind of like what Tommy Hill did against Colorado in the first half there. People may or may not know, but the 5 Heart Podcast has a Twitter or X account, and it's the number 5 Heart Podcast. And usually the one thing that I'm saying multiple times in a game is get off the field, D. Like on 3rd down, like let's go. Let's not give up extra opportunities. Macro question: is the 3-3-5 gone? Has it been transformed? Because the 3-3-5 did offer some flexibility as far as where you could potentially bring in an extra, hand in the dirt type. But what schematically is John Butler going to try to run?
It'll still be very much a 3-3-5. I think Rhule mentioned that at the end of the year too, that he liked the flexibility that it provided. He liked the fact that it gave opposing offensive coordinators some problems in their game prep because of how many different fronts that we can fit into from our pre-snap look, because modern defense really isn't about what you align in pre-snap, 3-3-5, 3-4, 4-3. It's all about being a hybridized defense that you can show a 3-3-5 look pre-snap, and then you can fit into a 4-3 or even a 5 down post-snap, making sure the gaps are covered. And so I think that that's here to stay because of the flexibility and because the different range of offenses that you see. I mean, that 3-3-5, when Tony White was first hired, people were like, oh, that'll never work in the Big Ten. That 3-3-5 had some pretty good performances through 2023 and 2024. Yeah. You had games against Iowa, real offensive juggernaut, I know, the Iowa Hawkeyes, but one of the more dominating defensive performances that we've ever had in recent memory last year. I mean, from the get-go, I think the first play of the game, they turn and hand off on a zone dive to Caleb Johnson, and Elijah Judy's kind of playing the role of the 4th down lineman in that game, because of that flexibility that we were talking about earlier. And he absolutely collapses the block, and it's just a swarm of tacklers to the ball carrier. And that's because we do what's called instead of 2 gap or 1 gap, we do what's called a T-GOG, 2 gap, 1 gap. So based on the defender reading, he has a visual key that his eyes are on pre-snap. He has a physical key that he attacks. So if you're playing defensive end on the inside shoulder of the offensive tackle, your physical key is that offensive tackle that you're aligned over. Your visual key is that offensive guard. So if that guard pulls the opposite direction, you are with hands on the offensive tackle, working your way from that B gap that you're aligned in, you're controlling it there, and you're working that blocker over into the A gap that's over to your left, And so if it's a play where you're engaging with the offensive tackle and you see your visual key of that guard step towards you, now while you're controlling that offensive tackle, you're stepping firmly into the B gap and you're holding that gap down, and now a linebacker is going to fill into that A gap. Or the nose guard, center's taking him, trying to zone, either with a base step or a reach. He's trying to block him and seal off that A gap to provide a cutback lane for the tailback. that nose is holding down that gap, and he's got the center. He's controlling the center as his physical key. He's keeping his eyes back inside to the opposite weak side A gap. So it's basically you're still just one gapping, but it's all about the eyes. It's not so much like under Pelini, the two gap took so much criticism because we had defenders who were firing out, and then they're steering the offensive linemen and just trying to cancel out gaps for linebackers to fill.
Kaylee, with this statement, I thought I had to double check. It's not a question, but Kaylee says, I think people are underestimating the Terry Braden hire.
I think so too. Chiefs have had great defensive line play for the past however many years he was in his tenure there as the assistant D-line coach. And I think that could be a huge thing, for the Big Ten. The AFC West and what the Chiefs have done in January football, very much what we're going to run into in the Big Ten as well. I think that he's a great teacher of technique. I think he's a really good motivator, and I think he'll be a really good recruiter at that position too.
Let's see. Perpetually Indignant says, I've just never been a fan of any scheme where we have only three up front. And before you respond to that, because I think they go a little hand in hand, Fred says, I've always been a 4-3 guy, especially in a power league, but I guess a lot of Big Ten is morphing into different offenses. So I guess we got flexibility. I mean, when we started, when you stepped in on Five Heart back in 2017, we had no idea the conference was going to look the way it is. It's now coast to coast, 18 schools. And with that brings a lot of offensive philosophies. It's not just the 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It's not just the big uglies up front and mountain movers. You have Oregon, USC. You have, I'd say Maryland and Rutgers, but they don't know what they have right now. So, but there are a lot of different offensive philosophies. So that 3-3-5 still, as we mentioned, that kind of keyword flexibility, just being able to adapt to whatever we're going to line up against.
Yeah. The flexibility is huge, especially when you look at it from the standpoint of the practice constraints, the time spent practicing, time spent teaching the scheme. It's gotten a little bit better in recent years with the NCAA lightening up a little bit. But at the end of the day, they're not grown men in the NFL spending 8 hours a day, at the facility,
right,
in meetings, for a living. These are still, they got class, they got different, obligations that they have to meet. And so you got to make it simple. You got to make it simple. A lot of these guys are still pretty early on in their football playing career, even though they're playing major college football. You can't inundate them with, all these different schemes that you're going to implement week to week. A 4-3 probably right now against, I'll use Iowa as an example because they're still the most traditional offense in the Big Ten. A 4-3 probably opens you up to more cutback lanes given up against their zone run scheme. 3-3-5, the way that you're controlling gaps and then, you're kind of being kind of a flex front in how you're filling against certain plays, depending on the play type, play direction, the type of block that, the defender's getting, whether it's a gap, scheme or a zone scheme, those blocks are going to differ. What that comes down to is what is the most economical and efficient way that we can implement a defense to play at a high level. And I think that's where the 3-3-5 really gives you the most opportunity because you still have 5 defensive backs on the field against, pass heavy teams, the Maryland type teams that really like to sling it around. But then against the run, you're able to still have, at least 6 in the box.
Sure.
And if you're, doing what White did in 2023, where he played Isaac Gifford more as the rover and Omar Brown was the safety, Omar Brown was such a good safety against the run that it was like we were playing with 2 rovers. So having those guys who are really effective tacklers kind of turns it almost more into like a 3-5-3. So it's just about what you're emphasizing week to week on how you're going to defend the opposing offense.
We're coming up to the 90-minute mark, Hoss. So just some questions for that I've started throughout the show. Minnie asked early on, what are your hopes and dreams for this offensive line?
at least 200 yards per game rushing. 12 to 15 sacks given up.
Total.
Dylan doesn't need to be picking himself up off the ground after being sacked 9 times.
No, we don't need that at all. So we got brought up something about your, and I don't know this. I've lost the context or forgot the context of this comment, but Blaine says Hoss strikes me more as of a drill sergeant than teacher.
As when I mentioned that my summers are pretty low key.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it got talked about in the comments, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because I know you so well off the show. I'm like, nah, teacher.
Yep.
You're quite the educator.
That
I don't know.
pays the bills.
To be a drill instructor, you'd have to shave, and I can't picture that.
No, I haven't been clean shaven in at least 5 years.
Minnie says last season we went through a lot of significant changes in the season, and she likes how Matt Rhule responded.
I do too. He was the skipper, and he never panicked.
Not that I was the skipper.
No, you're the skipper.
B2B says we haven't been good since Bo. Poke some holes in that. Give us some hope.
I mean, they're not. I don't know if Beetle is a man or a woman, so I'm not going to say he or she, but they're right. They're right. We haven't. I was just actually talking to Katie about this the other day because she has to hear me just, basically word vomit my thoughts on Husker football. I really feel like we took for granted so much the 9 wins, and I was one of those people at the tail end. I was like, God, I'm so sick of getting blown out in big games. I want to break through. If it's not going to be him, let's fire him. Let's get somebody else in. Tony Soprano has a great line that Fred will know. Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. And we all got it. Those of us who wanted Pelini gone. I would commit murder now if it'd be like, hey, you get 9 wins every single year. Proverbially. We're speaking proverbially. 9 wins every single year. I'd be like, yeah, I'll take it. I miss just that level of consistency was nice.
Right.
Those blowout losses and losses in big games were always vexing. They never got any easier. But at the same time, I think that the candle was going to go out on Bo at some point because his recruiting class in 14 went for the 15 class, but 14 season when he was still coaching, leading up to being fired. He would have eventually ran out of talent because there were so many holes to fill from 2014 to 2015. You had Kenny Bell graduating. You had Amir Abdullah graduating. Randy Gregory left. Zaire Anderson left. You had a lot of great players that were leaving the program. I think that if he would have stayed, 2015 probably is a pretty ugly start. I think that BYU, they beat Mike Riley's first team, on a Hail Mary. I think that BYU with Taysom Hill running the way he was running probably scores 50, 55 points on Nebraska and Lincoln that day. So it was a matter of time. Nebraska fired Pelini probably a year too early, just like we fired Solich a year too early. We should have given him one more year to see where it was going.
It's like George Michael and later Limp Bizkit said, you got to have faith. That's a night. Moving on. Fred says every Husker football season is a gift, but why is it got to always be a pair of socks? I don't know. That just made me chuckle.
That's a good one, Fred.
Kaylee says we love Sue because he was our last great hero on our last good teams. ... Until now.
Wow.
Well, I guess we need.
Since then, though. We've had some great players since then. Not quite at that level. I mean, Sue was generational.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned Amir Abdullah. Had
Amir, Quincy Ananwa is a guy that doesn't get his credit that he deserves anymore. Maybe it's just getting a little bit more wistful in my, getting into my mid-30s. But I'm like, you know what? Taylor Martinez and Tommy Armstrong wasn't that bad.
Yeah, we didn't know what we had. Now we got a guy named Dylan. I don't know. It's
Dylan ain't no Jamal Lord.
I you know what though?
I've got a soft spot in my heart for Jamal Lord.
I know. It pops up on the algorithm, makes it pop up on my Facebook reels, but that 80-something yard run to open up the second half against Kansas State when Taylor Martinez was a freshman, that game is not. We've been starting to do some watch-alongs for exclusive member content on YouTube, and that game is not in like its condensed 40-minute version, just whistle to whistle. So that breaks my heart a little bit, but
I think we need to have a watch along for one of my all-time favorite Husker games, 2013 Nebraska, Michigan.
I'll have to see
Amir Abdullah on the option pitch diving into the end zone to win the game.
What about?
I think we held Michigan to like minus 30 rushing yards because we sacked Devin Gardner so many times.
I'm trying to think of. Speaking of Amir Abdullah, the equally impressive the run that helped us beat McNeese State. So
it's so bittersweet because we should have never been in that position.
I know. Wait, hold on. Husker Chuck says, didn't Jamal Lord lead a 23-point comeback against Miami only to throw a terrible interception in overtime?
That was Tommy Armstrong. Jamal Lord threw a pick against Texas in the end zone. We should have been playing for a field goal.
Yeah. Minnie said, what year? You said it was 2013 Nebraska, Michigan, right?
Yep.
Okay. The one that I want to go back and watch is 2012 Nebraska, Ohio State, but I digress.
Why? They hung 63 points on us.
No. 2000. Which one was the
2011
comeback? Okay,
2011.
I got the dang year wrong,
dude. Yeah,
I don't want to go back and watch losses. Just remember that, Hoss. I just want to go back and watch wins.
You know what? I'm one of those people that I will actually go back and watch a loss as long as it's a good game.
As long as it's what?
As long as it's a good game.
Okay. Well, you're
like
better.
I can go back and look at it, and not feel like I just want to puke. I've never rewatched.
Or objectively.
I've never rewatched 2012 Nebraska, Wisconsin, the Big 12 Big 10 championship game. Like that game, like that's like torture. If somebody ever wanted to torture me, lock me in a room with that game, just playing on repeat.
Perpetually Indignant says, by the way, Aaron Keene, I miss when we fired 9-win coaches and didn't talk longingly about Jamal Lord.
Jamal Lord ran for 230 against the Texas defense. That was the number 1 ranked defense in the nation. Like Jamal Lord does not get enough credit.
Mr. Matney says, how long do you think it'll be before we are conference champions?
Could be next year. Could be 10 years from now. Who knows?
That's why they play the game, right?
Yep. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid, David.
Okay, Kaylee, again, I misspoke. All right. I didn't mean the 2012 Ohio State. I meant 2011 Joe Bowserman throwing it, 50 yards into the stands. I'm sorry. I'm not going to watch the Indiana game from last year either.
No, I was pissed that you even want to do an overreaction show to that game.
I'm sorry. Roger Moore with a great one here. 3 simple words: God, country, option.
GCO.
And Mr. Matney says, Hoss has made an appearance. The season is close. Kind of like Groundhog Day. If Hoss sees his shadow, we're only 2 months out.
Still 2 long months,
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. I think summer is the most overrated season. It's for the birds. The only people who like summer are people that have never worked an outdoor job in their life. And summer's nothing but humidity and bugs. And so once it hits July 4th, I'll enjoy the 4th of July, eat a hot dog, drink an ice cold beer, watch the fireworks. But when I wake up the morning of July 5th, it might as well be September 1st in my book.
See, I'm the opposite. I give me summer over winter any day. Give me 100 degrees over 0 because I can still go to work in 100 degrees. But if it's snowing and freezing and kids got snow days, things like that, that traps me at house and I can't go out and do my job. So
I went for a work meeting this afternoon, full suit and tie. And immediately I was just like, yeah, this sucks. Like this weather, wearing a suit in this weather is the worst thing on earth.
Yeah, it's my daily.
Yeah, and whoever invented the necktie, I would love to, meet them in a dark alley.
I have so many neckties. I remember since yesterday was Father's Day, my first Father's Day, which was 9 years ago now, I got a tie holder, but it's battery operated and it spins around like a carousel. I fixed it onto my the hanger rods in my closet, so it spins around, lights up. It's awesome. If it played music, I would probably just like rig it to always spin, like play care. Moving on. Tony is a Minnesota fan, so we want to preface that by we did one of the first watch alongs that we watched was the 83 Nebraska Minnesota game, and he says that was outrageous.
There's a great story about Minnesota in that era when they hired Lou Holtz. He took a job. He took the job there, and he asked the AD, I forget who it was, how good were you guys last year? And they said, well, we only lost to Nebraska by 10. And he's like, oh, that's not bad. That's pretty respectable. When he goes 10 touchdowns.
And then again, yesterday was Father's Day, and you're a dad. So Pitt wants to know, Hoss, how's the baby? You feel weird now, and how's mom?
The baby's great. He's growing. He eats a lot. He sleeps. He's starting to realize that, hey, this bearded guy is kind of an important guy in my life, The weird feeling, it keeps hitting me that I'm somebody's dad now. I'm just like, wow, like I'm somebody's dad, How's mom doing? How's Katie doing? She's doing great. She is an absolute trooper, warrior.
Awesome. Well, it's been such a blessing to, just catch the updates and be friends with you. Consider y'all friends. Katie's you've known me for a number of years. Katie's only, I guess you've both only ever put up with me in person once, but yeah. So I'm blessed to call y'all friends. I'm so, excited for Lane and, let's see. There's just more talk about me being an old man. I have to somehow organically work in newfangled. I don't know how to do that at this point in the show.
Cap or no cap, Greg?
Backwards cap?
That's bussing.
What are you talking about?
I'm telling you, I'm trying to teach you some slang, man. I work with the youths.
The Utes?
Yeah, the Utes.
All right, let me try it. You kids and your newfangled terminology.
Okay.
I did it. It is a stretch. Well, thank you, man, for joining the show tonight. And I guess we got to thank Minnie for going on vacation and affording us this opportunity to sit in on Monday Night Therapy. We're all out of our starred comments and hope, Hoss, that you'll come back and maybe sit in August for a little season preview conversation on the 5 Heart Podcast.
Would love to.
Awesome. Take care of that beautiful family of yours, my friend, and all of you out there watching, whether it's on Facebook, on YouTube, or of course on X. We thank you for spending your time with us tonight. We'll see you Thursday night, 9:00 Central, on those same platforms for the 5 Heart Podcast. For my great friend, fellow Husker fan, and longtime broadcast buddy, Hoss Reuter. I'm Greg Mahochko. This is Monday Night Therapy, and I'm not good enough to close the show the way Minnie does. So I am simple enough to close the show the way John did. And I'll just say, good night, Hoss.
Good night, Greg.
Good night, everybody else. And go Big Red.
Go Big Red.